Fleming in the Philippines here. I hope you're all doing well. Happy New Year. It's 2022 and we do hope it's going to be a good year for us and for everyone else. Please remember, we do need your support, so please go to our Patreon or one of the other funding sites, the names of which, addresses for which, I will put up, and try to help. Also, you can subscribe to my new newsletter. There are actually two. The first one has been launched already. It's called I Am My Niche. So I thought, I am pretty eclectic. I think and talk about a lot of different things. So I thought rather than specialize too much and have lots and lots of different newsletters, I would have one that just followed what I'm interested in. The other, which will follow soon, will be launched later this week, will be called Controversial Opinions. And that's where you'll find a lot of the things that you're maybe used to here. For example, my direct personal relationships with Ladyboys and other people would go into I Am My Niche, whereas conversations about what constitutes transsexualism and the other sexual issues, also political issues, Islam, things like that, they'll all go in controversial opinions because I am pretty fucking controversial, let's be honest. So that's that. So please head over to substack.com and I'll give you the address and you can join there. I'm also going to put up my address from my Discord server. Again, please come along and join the chat. You'll enjoy it. So, what I want to talk about today is the problems that you will encounter if you're a man who's involved with a ladyboy. And this is very sensitive stuff. So I want you to pin your little lugs back and listen. I've known quite a few ladyboys, and almost everyone has had some serious issues with males. And I don't mean romantic ones. Every single one has had some sort of problem with either fathers, stepfathers, or older brothers. Very rarely with their mothers. Their mothers tend to be quite supportive. There's not really a problem there, but the male side of the family can be extremely difficult. And I'm talking about severe violence. We're talking about the kind of violence that, in all honesty, were it to occur in a Western nation, would get the guy to jail. He'd be arrested. Things like beating with sticks. I've actually witnessed one girl I knew had a scar. She was hit by her father with a stick, and it left a permanent indentation in her skull, under the hairline, fortunately, so you couldn't see it. That person also was tied to a stake which her father had driven into a red ant's nest, and when her mother came home and found out, she was already unconscious and had to be hospitalised. Hung up by the heels, rope tied round her leg, and hung up from a rafter. All because she was girly. All because this person was girly, wasn't a boyish boy. And this was her father's way of trying to deal with this. The same person actually at one point, because he was so fed up with her, he kidnapped her, took her to Manila in his van, which he had at that time. It was a work van. And with the intention of selling her to a Japanese whom he owed money to. And by some miracle, the girl managed to get out of the vehicle. She was 13, out of the vehicle and ran away and eventually got back to her mother, who was distraught. That's fairly extreme, but it's not particularly uncommon. Everyone will have, any girl that you are involved with, any ladyboy that you're involved with, will have some story that would make the hair stand up on your head. They really would. And it's not funny. It's not amusing. The reason it happens is quite simple. Filipino, Southeast Asian males generally, same thing happens in Thailand. They're heavily invested in masculinity. And they're very invested in having their sons being masculine. Because the two-group society is active here. There is a men group and a not men group. And men socialize within the men group. If you go to any social gathering in any of these countries, the men are not at the same table as the not men, if you like, mainly women. They just aren't. They're two separate groups. It's quite obvious what's going on here. And the thing is that a man who has a gay son, and they don't differentiate between, shall we say, femboys and ladyboys, will constantly get it in the neck from other men in this group that he has to do something. He has to stop this. He has to basically thrash the gay out of the child. And I've heard this term many times. Beat the gay out of the boy. It's appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And if you want to ask me, some people do. So to digress a moment, many people have asked why I am so invested in trying to help and protect HSTS ladyboys and other trans women. And the fact is that I have heard all these stories. I know what it's like for them. You know, I've seen the damage done, the scars left. And it's not just physical scars. There's emotional scars as well. And this is what you're actually going to have to deal with if you're getting involved with someone like this. They might have nightmares. There are things that you might do without even thinking that trigger a reaction in them which you're not predicting. It's like, what did I do? What did I say? You have to understand that these girls are actually suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically what's called childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll do the acronym and I'll put it on screen because I can't say it. And what that means is that in later life, things that may happen that trigger flashbacks, and that just sets them off. You know, and it could be that they go crazy and start screaming and shouting, or they could just burst into tears, run out the door, all sorts of things. And you'll be thinking, what the hell's going on? What did I say? And it might be something really minor. You might even just have made a joke. And she picks it up this totally wrong way. Because it flashes back to something that happened in her childhood, which was so traumatic that, 20 years later, it's still there and it's still active. That all that pain, that hurt, that fear, the terror, it's all still in her. And so you have to be, it's not that you have to treat them with kid gloves, but you have to understand that this will very likely have happened to them. And that there's always a chance that this will come out. Certainly in the Philippines, there are very few girls around who had completely supportive parents from the get-go. That's really unusual. It might possibly be a bit more common in Thailand, but here, no. It just doesn't happen. It's extremely rare. One girl I was involved with, it was lovely, and she really wasn't that badly harmed, but her father was actually very supportive of her, and wouldn't allow anybody to harm him. But the trouble was, when he was away at work, her elder brothers would beat the living shit out of her because she was girly. And they were getting it in the neck from their school pals because, they've got a gay brother, a ladyboy, right? And she was like, very young, not even in her teens and in her early teens when this was happening. And yes, it does leave marks. It does leave emotional scars. And you can't get around that. So when you're dealing with having relationships with ladyboys, and we're talking about particularly HSTS ladyboys, because let's be clear, late bloomers, that's what we would call autogynephiles in the West. They appear usually in the age range, certainly not much before 14, up to 20. Usually most of them, it'll be what they call sophomore year. They're about 16. They're not really so terrified of their parents at that stage. I mean, a child at that point could just leave and survive. And some of them, that's what they do. They do leave. They're not really intimidated in the same way that a very small child would be by parental aggression. And it's paternal. It's paternal aggression. Again, it's very rarely from the mothers. It's mainly from the fathers. So we're talking about what we call HSTS. That's the small, cute, pretty ones. The ones that, they're just adorable. And it takes a bit of thinking about to figure out how the hell anyone could harm a child like that. Especially when you're talking about children of maybe 5, 6, 7 years old or younger, being beaten senseless, literally senseless, by men because they won't man up. I mean, it's appalling. It's really appalling, and it should never happen. I sincerely hope it isn't happening in the West. But the fact is that there is a movement, certainly in the UK now, which is trying to deny the existence of HSTS, that they don't exist. And so their protections are going to vanish. They're not going to be protected. People will just go and ignore it. It's not real. You know, what they're doing is fake anyway. So yeah, thrash away. Now, these children in places like the UK will be protected because you're no longer allowed to beat the living crap out of your kids in the UK in the way that perhaps they did 100 years ago. Nobody ever beat the crap out of me when I was a kid, by the way. Didn't happen. Got shouted at a few times, but no. Actually lamping the kids, no. And I never did it to my kids. It takes a boor to do that sort of thing. But it could still happen. And of course, the other thing that happens alongside the actual physical violence is the constant belittling and demoralisation of the young person, the child in this case, that nothing they do will ever be good enough because they're not being boys. Right? They could be really hopeless at school. They could be completely useless at everything, but as long as they're masculine, dad isn't going to mind. And they could be absolutely brilliant musicians, dancers, artists, everything, just absolutely terrific at all this stuff. But because they're girly, he's going to beat the crap out of them. And these are things that are going to carry forward. And you, if you're involved with a ladyboy, you have to try and get your head around this and try and see inside their minds and see the things that have happened to them in the past. When your ladyboy girlfriend is crying in the middle of the night, it might not be because of you. It might be some nightmare that's coming back to her from things that happened 20 years ago that are still haunting her, still affecting her in every day. And a lot of ladyboys, especially the HSTS ones, they're not particularly confident, let's be honest. The AGP ones tend to be much more so. But the HSTS, they're how can we put this? They're committed in their femininity. They know they're girls. They'll tell you, I was a girl before I was born. My mother knew I was a girl. When she bought my first sets of clothes as a baby, she bought girl clothes because she went, that's definitely not a boy. It's not one of those. And that's really supportive. But the men aren't going to do that. The males usually will be extremely aggressive. So it's them that's the problem. And these are the kind of kids that are affected really badly by this because they are sensitive, creative, often very smart, which is a little bit in contradiction to Blanchard's findings, and impressionable. That's the word I would use. And just to slightly digress a little bit, this is one of the great arguments and the reasons I think that Dr. Ken Zucker was a monster, which I do think he was. And it's an opinion, Ken, you can't sue me for an opinion. He was an absolute monster. He believed that the appropriate way to deal with girliness in a boy was to take away everything that boy was using to reinforce his girly nature. So don't read girly books. Don't watch girly programs. His literal phrase was, in an interview, Zucker said, get rid of the Barbies. Everything that child is using to try and develop his own personality, which is as a girl, had to be removed and destroyed and replaced with things that had no relationship to him whatsoever. Things that belonged to boys. And so this was a kind of mind control. And because, HSTS particularly are often they're very impressed by older authority figures, particularly male ones. And so you get someone like Zucker, who's a trained psychologist. He's trained in mind bending. Okay? And he's working on a child every week, 2 or 3 times a week maybe, getting the kid's parents to do the dirty work for him when he's not there. Constantly reinforcing this idea that no, you can't be a girl. You must not be a girl. You must be a man. You've got to be a man. Every single one of these will be gay in one way or another. It'll either be a so-called gay man, which doesn't really exist. It's a girl pretending to be a man, or a transsexual. And what is the point? Why not just let them be girls? They're going to be happier. They can have a fulfilled life as a girl. They can go and find a nice straight man, marry him, but they don't have to be part of the new gay man meat grinder where they will be seduced by older men, and when they become a little older themselves, got rid of. It's not a nice scene. I'm sorry, it just isn't. And the best thing for a young girly boy is to avoid it by completing as a woman, and being a woman, living as a woman, finding yourself a nice man who accepts her. And it's not that hard to do now. maybe 20 years ago. And things were different then, because we have more knowledge of what goes on now. We all have the internet, most of us do. We have social media. So men now know that there are ordinary straight guys like them who are with trans women, HSTS trans women. And so it's taken away a lot of the stigma. It's like, well, wait a minute, can't you see how beautiful she is? Can't you see that this is a desirable woman? Whether she was born male or not, who cares? And I would have to say, and I do not like to be crude, but anyone who thinks that the back entrance is a poor relation to the front one actually needs to go and try it. That's all I'm saying. And of course, they absolutely adore sex like that. That's what, it just blows their mind. They love it. They absolutely love it. And, having a lover who is not only passionate about sex, but also absolutely loves the way it's happening, it's quite an impressive thing, It really is. I will do a very quick brief aside here. We got a response from one of the low-life barflies on, I can't remember which, I think it was actually a photograph, a community post, who was saying that it's really easy to tell a ladyboy, you spot them straight away. He meant the kind of 6-foot bruiser, with a wig, a bra full of socks. He's got a wife and 3 kids at home that he's struggling to provide for. And the kind of, I don't even think they're really ladyboys, who hang around the bars in places like Pattaya, places like Phuket, to seduce men, get money off them. That's not the kind of people we're talking about here. We are, and I've said many times, we are not talking about the kind of girls you will meet in bars here. We're not talking about those, right? If your experience is from bar girls, then forget it. You don't know a thing about it. Just forget it. Please don't come on here telling me that you know what the story is if all you've ever done is spend 3 weeks a year in Thailand, in Pattaya, getting blind drunk and having a great big tall masculine ladyboy Roger you stupid every night. This is not the kind of girl we're talking about. We are actually talking about girls, and they are very hard to identify. Once your eye's in, yeah, okay, you've got a better chance, but you'll still miss some. I mean, I know girls that you would never get. You'd never get. You just walk past them and think, nice girl. And you wouldn't even as someone who appreciates the particular, how shall we put it, the particular qualities of ladyboys, will just not, most of us just won't get it, unless she has like particularly big feet or something like that, and then we'll just go, wait a minute. But the rest of it, no. No, you're not going to get these ones. So, you can put your experience and those of your drunken Aussie bogan friends out the window, because it's not going to work. And we know what you are, We know what people like you are like. And you're actually part of the problem. So, bugger off. Leaving that aside. For the man who's actually interested in a sweet HSTS ladyboy trans woman, they're the most loving girls you'll ever meet. And they're appreciative in a way that other girls aren't. A ladyboy is grateful that you treat her like a lady. Women in the West are so assuming these days. They're so presumptuous. They're so, what is the word? Entitled. That's it. They've got this massive sense of entitlement that they don't actually care anymore. Don't treat me like a woman. I don't need I don't need you. Because they hate men. They just loathe men. There is no ladyboy or trans woman in the West who loathes men. They don't exist. Right? Any ladyboy who says, I'm a feminist, right, you're looking at an AGP. Sorry, you are. You're either looking at an AGP or a liar. Because none of them believe in the feminist crap. They all want to be women for their men. It's basic stuff. It's not a question of, I don't like men hitting on me or kicking or holding doors open for me or anything like that. And I'm going to really tell them off if they even think so and try and, assert that I'm too weak. It's amazing. These people, these feminists, Well, I mean, there's lots of words I could call them, but YouTube won't let me. These feminists, they are absolutely determined that, we're as good as any man. We can do anything that a man can do. We are just the bee's fucking knees and all the rest of it. Yet, you get a man, a brickie in a floral frock, competing in one of their sports, and they go nuts. It's like, oh my God, they're ruining women's sports. Oh, this is awful. You know, if women are just the same as men, right, and can do anything that a man can do, what's the problem? Why is there a problem with that? No, I'm not saying I approve of it. I strongly disapprove of it. But it's absolutely logically true that if women can do anything a man can do, then why shouldn't men in dresses compete in women's sports? Please tell me. I'd love to hear why. Anyway, to get back to the point, and that is your sweet little ladyboy. You got to be careful. You've got to understand the fragility that she feels. And one of the things that she will feel fragile about is the possibility that you might leave. Because ladyboys, trans women generally, they give their hearts quite easily. They might be a little bit shy at first, a little bit cautious, because maybe they've been hurt before. Especially here, some Western guys, abused them in the past. The fucking runners. And again, that's a bunch of people I have no bloody time for whatsoever. They come to a country where, and act like despicable people, just screwing every woman they can find. That's not how it works here. If you screw a woman here, you're supposed to marry her. Unless it's a bar girl, different. You want to do things like that, pay them. But of course, these guys don't like paying for sex, so they try and do it for nothing, and they're just scum. These people are utter scum. These men. I don't really think they are men. No. A real man would just pay for it and say, okay, it's a business arrangement. I need a good fuck. You're going to give me one. Here's $30. That's it. Done. Done and dusted. Nobody's heart is broken. No emotions are involved. No commitment is involved. But in the kind of girls we're talking about who are not sex workers, if they commit really, really hard. I mean, really, really hard. And I will freely admit, I did not know that when I started coming to the Philippines, to Thailand. I thought that they were basically like modern Western women, that they used sex in the same way as men use sex. They don't. For them, it's a commitment. For a man to make love to a ladyboy and then leave her, it's a gross insult to her. It's a massive loss of face. And it will also bring back all the things that she dreaded in her childhood when people were telling her, you'll never get a man. You'll never get a man to love you. You've got a cock. What man could love a girl with a cock? All those nasty things that people whispered in her ear when she was young will come back when you dump her. And she'll go, well, maybe they're right. And you could destroy her. You could ruin her. Why would you do that to someone? So my advice is, in the first place, do not get into bed with a ladyboy if you don't intend to keep getting into bed with her. And try to at least try. I mean, okay, some relationships don't work out. It happens. But you're going to try to make it work out. And if it doesn't work out, try to make it not work out nicely. It's not always possible. Some of them just will go crazy anyway. But there you go. That happens. I'm going to leave it at that, and it's just really to tell men who are getting involved with ladyboys, and trans women in the West are the same, if you can find them. I mean, it's not easy to find HSTS trans women in the West. It really isn't. Most of the trans women you'll meet, well, I call themselves trans women, they're actually transvestites, are AJP transvestites. And you do not want to be to attempt to have a serious relationship with one of those, because she's already in love with herself. She can't love you. She's got no room. Right? She's already committed, and it's to herself as a woman. You follow? But the HSDS are remarkably fragile, and they need a lot of looking after. They are high maintenance, but I don't mean financially necessarily. An AGP will be quite likely to be a real gold digger, but an HSTS, no. If she really loves you, she will not be constantly harping on about money. She'll just be. She loves you. She just wants you. She wants to be with you. She wants you to be happy. So I do ask myself, you do have to ask yourself, how could it be better? Are there women left in the West who treat men like that? Yeah, I know there are. There are some. But if you happen to be a slightly older man and you do not want children, that's a really important thing. I've already had my kids. I don't want any more. I promised my daughter, no more kids. You'll be always be my baby. That's that. You can't do that in Southeast Asia. You probably can't do that in the West. A young woman of 21, 22, 23, the sort of age you might be interested in, is going to say, oh, wait a minute, I want kids. And it's her right. You cannot deny a woman her children. That is totally immoral for a man to say, oh, I love you, but you can't have any kids. I mean, that's horrible. That's just, how can you be so low? And on the other hand, if you're into slightly older women, I guess 35 years old, around about that, well, they've already got kids and they need looking after, right? Her attentions are never going to be focused on you alone. I mean, she might love you, but she's really trying to protect her kids because she's a mother, and that's what mothers do. It's right and proper. Her first priority, her first sphere of interest is her own kids. And yes, she will love the fact that you will pay for their education. And yeah, she might well give you a real nice time in bed over it. But at the end of the day, you're not her focus. The kids are. What does that leave you with? It leaves you with Ladyboys. They are as beautiful. I'm talking about the HSTS ones. For you barflies who don't understand this, go and find yourself a 6'2" bruiser in a dress. Anyway, HSTS are beautiful. They are sexy. They're incredibly responsive. They just love just sitting on the sofa, cuddling you, watching a movie. All that cheesy stuff, but it's so nice, it's so sweet, it's so lovely, and it's so loving. That's what the attraction of the Ladyboy is. The problem is, you have to deal with the monsters of her past. And these are important. You don't try to belittle what's going on. Anyone who has suffered the kind of things that I've heard people explain, and they have been backed up. These stories have been backed up. I have investigated with other, members of the same family, the mother, the aunts. Oh yeah. Her father used to beat her senseless. It's surprising she actually lived that long. That sort of thing. Any child who went through that has got monsters. And you are going to have to deal with them. You will have to deal with them. Hopefully you're a slightly older man. You're a bit more mature. You might have kids of your own. So you'll have some skills which will help you to do that. But bear in mind, you will have to use them all the time. It's part of life and part of living with a ladyboy or a transsexual woman in the West. And I mean a transsexual, not an AGP. Okay, that's enough for just now because we nearly done half an hour. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.